Welcome to the Deep Dive. We have compiled a truly fascinating stack of sources today, focused on the foundational history and radical reform of the Hajj pilgrimage.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And for you, our listener, this deep dive is really a shortcut to understanding one of the world's most enduring and, frankly, most misunderstood global rituals.
That's right. When you look at the Hajj, you are witnessing religious formation in real time. We're tracing how a faith purifies, reclaims, and completely repurposes practices that were centuries old.
So what's our mission here?
Our mission is to understand that foundational question. Why is the Kaaba, the absolute center of Islam, absent from the core narratives of Judaism and Christianity? And, how did Prophet Muhammad transform this ancient Arabian ritual into a global pillar of monotheism?
Our journey today takes us from the deepest layers of Abrahamic tradition through the Kaaba's, its messy life as a pagan pantheon, and then finally to its dramatic monotheistic restoration.
And we'll get into the details, the revolutionary changes made to the rituals themselves, and that pivotal identity crisis settled by the shift in the direction of prayer, the Qibla.
We've organized the sources to follow the timeline, so we'll start with the contested origin story, then move to the Kaaba's pre-Islamic power as a hub for trade and worship.
They will analyze the surgical specific reforms, and finally put that Qibla shift into its broader theological and, political context.
Okay, let's jump straight into the theological puzzle at the heart of this. If Abraham, or Ibrahim, built the Kaaba with his son Ishmael, as the Islamic tradition insists, why do the Torah and the Bible have absolutely no mention of it?
This is the moment. This is where the Abrahamic narratives they fork. It's largely defined by whose lineage holds the sacred geography.
Okay.
In the Islamic belief, the covenant runs through both Isaac and Ishmael. Ibrahim builds the Kaaba with Ishmael as a foundational act of worship. So Ishmael is therefore recognized as the founding ancestor of the Arab people and, of course, the Prophet Muhammad's lineage.
But the focus in the other traditions is exclusively elsewhere.
Absolutely. The Judeo-Christian narrative centers the covenant almost entirely on Isaac, whose lineage leads to the Israelites and, ultimately to Jesus Christ.
Right.
And their sacred geography is Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. Ishmael is in the biblical narrative, of course, but he's the half-brother sent away into the wilderness. He's promised to become a great nation, but he's not the inheritor of the main covenant tied to that sacred land.
And the locations of those wanderings, they're geographically critical, too. The sources show a really stark physical split.
They really do. In the biblical account, Hagar and Ishmael are sent away. They wander in the desert of Beersheba or Paran. There's a miracle with water, but their destiny is separate from that covenant center.
But in the Islamic tradition...
Ibrahim leaves Hagar and Ishmael in the desolate valley of Mecca. This desperate act leads to Hagar's frantic search, the miraculous discovery of the Zamzam well, and critically, Ibrahim's return to build the Kaaba with his son. That act establishes Mecca as the original purified house of God.
This detail is fascinating because it shows a kind of theological necessity. It's about integrating Mecca into the Abrahamic legacy to legitimize its primacy, making it
older and purer than any later site.
Yeah.
Precisely. It repositions the Kaaba as the first house of worship for the one God. But if we pull back and look at the sheer historical evidence, outside the theological narratives, the sources are pretty clear that the earliest non-Muslim accounts that mention the Kaaba only appear in the 7th century CE. There's just no external verifiable evidence linking the structure to the era of Abraham.
So we have to acknowledge that historically, by the time of Muhammad's mission, this site had been a functioning religious magnet for centuries, completely independent of any clear Abrahamic link.
Correct. Archaeological and historical consensus confirms that Kaaba was already a massive, essential pilgrimage site and the absolute hub for trade. It wasn't some struggling local shrine. It was the gravitational center of Arabian spirituality and commerce.
And let's examine Mecca itself during that period. It wasn't monotheistic at all.
Not even close. It was a marketplace of gods. The Kaaba housed an estimated 360 idols, often linked to specific tribal deities like Hubal, Alat, Al-Uzza, Manat. Each tribe basically had its representative deity there, making it the central religious clearinghouse.
And this wasn't just about worship, it was the entire economy.
Massively so. The pilgrimage months, the Hajj, were sacred periods of truce. This allowed trade caravans safe passage across a violent peninsula, making Mecca the most influential city, a financial capital built on pilgrims and trade.
And the powerful Quraysh tribe, the custodians of the Kaaba, they profited immensely from this.
Immensely. But the Kaaba's power was so great that it attracted a destructive rival decades before Islam even emerged. This is the incident in Surah Al-Fil, the chapter of the elephant.
A really critical story for establishing its pre-Islamic significance.
Absolutely. We're talking about Abraham al-Ashram, the Christian ruler or viceroy of Yemen, around 570 CE. Abraham was so envious of the revenue flowing into Mecca that he built this magnificent cathedral in Sana'a, hoping to divert the pilgrims there.
But that didn't work, so he decided to invade.
He marched an army, including war elephants, with the explicit goal of demolishing the Kaaba. And the sheer scale of that attack, decades before the Prophet's mission, proves the Kaaba was already recognized across the entire region as a colossal religious and economic center that had to be neutralized.
So the challenge for Muhammad wasn't starting from scratch. It was taking this powerful, profitable, polytheistic institution and just fundamentally rewriting its code.
That's it. It was a massive undertaking, changing the spiritual core without destroying the physical structure. The Prophet's approach was revolutionary, but also, pragmatic.
How so?
The claim was that they weren't inventing a new rite, but restoring the original uncorrupted rites of Ibrahim. The mission was to systematically strip away every trace of polytheism, what's known as shirk, and replace it with absolute monotheism, tawhid. The spiritual orientation, the niyya, or intention, had to be completely overhauled.
And that word niyya is so critical, isn't it? It means the outward action, the walking or running, is meaningless without the correct inward intention.
Exactly. They kept the familiar shell of the ritual, the motions Arabs had done for generations, but they installed a completely new spiritual hard drive. And this was dangerous too. They were directly challenging the economic and social identity of the Quraysh elite.
Let's look at some of the specific reforms that show this surgical change. Let's start with tawaf, the circumambulation.
Okay, so pre-Islam, circling the Kaaba was often performed naked, or partially so, which was seen as a sign of ritual purity. It was accompanied by whistling and clapping. The whole environment was chaotic.
And the Islamic reform?
It kept the physical action circling 7 times, but dramatically reversed the atmosphere. Modest clothing became mandatory, whistling and clapping were replaced by quiet, focused prayer, and of course all 360 idols were physically smashed and removed.
So the same motion suddenly pointed to a completely different spiritual truth.
Exactly. And we see an even clearer purification in the Talbiyah, the main pilgrim's chant.
Right, the Talbiyah provides this incredible window into the nature of pre-Islamic belief.
It really does. The original chant acknowledged God, saying, "Here I am, O God, here I am."
Yeah.
Sounds monotheistic, right?
It does, but there was a loophole.
A huge loophole.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase that followed was, "You have no partner except one who is permitted by you, whom you own and all that he owns."
That one phrase completely undermines the entire declaration.
It's a perfect theological escape clause. It allowed every tribe to justify their specific idol Hubal, or Alat, as a minor partner, or an intercessor, permitted by the one great God.
So Muhammad's reform was just to remove it.
Surgically simple, he removed that loophole phrase entirely. The Talbiyah became an unconditional declaration. "Here I am, O God, here I am. You have no partner, here I am." That move just unilaterally declared all tribal deities void.
But the reform that carried the most profound social and political weight, according to our sources, was what happened at the plain of Arafat.
This is truly revolutionary. Historically, the elite Quraysh tribe, the custodians with all the wealth and power, called themselves the Hums, the insiders.
And they had their own special rules for the Hajj.
They did. They maintained their superior social standing by exempting themselves from the main pilgrimage rite. They skipped the standing at Arafat, stopping closer to Mecca at Muzdalifah.
So they were literally performing a separate, shorter, less difficult pilgrimage to visually signal their higher status.
Exactly. It was a ritualized system of class privilege. The Islamic change just annihilated this system. The Prophet made standing at Arafat mandatory for every single person, rich, poor, Quraysh, non-Quraysh.
And by declaring the Hajj as Arafat, he made it the absolute cornerstone.
He did. By forcing the elite to stand alongside the common pilgrim, all wearing the same simple white garments, he mandated social equality and just ripped away the Quraysh's most powerful claim to religious and economic exceptionalism.
That is a fascinating example of ritual being used to dismantle social structure. Now, before all this was complete, there was another pivotal moment. The change in the direction of prayer, the Qibla.
Right. This happened relatively early in the Median period, around 623, 624 AD. We know the 5 daily prayers, the Salah, were established a bit earlier, around 601 AD.
And initially, the direction of prayer was Jerusalem.
Yes. When prayer was first established, Muslims faced Beit al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. This was the established practice, aligning the new community with the traditions of earlier prophets like Moses and Jesus.
But our sources highlight something important here.
Yeah, that neither the Quran nor the Hadith explicitly commanded this initial direction. It was just the accepted custom, a kind of temporary point of alignment.
So the community started by facing a symbol of continuity, but then a command came to face a symbol of independence.
That's a great way to put it. The shift to the Kaaba was explicitly commanded in the Quran, in Surah al-Baqarah. And this command was acknowledged as a shift away from a known previous direction, which confirms Jerusalem's prior use.
So what did that shift accomplish?
Two major things. It centralized the faith geographically around the purified Kaaba, and critically, it distinguished the Muslim community definitively from both Judaism and Christianity. It gave the community, the ummah, a unique, permanent theological anchor. It declared, "We are independent. Our foundation is the Kaaba of Ibrahim."
Now, one of the main reasons our listeners submitted this topic was to address some common external critiques of the Hajj. From the outside, some rituals can look, well, primitive.
Sure.
Let's address the spiritual logic here, starting with the biggest one, the black stone. Why do Muslims kiss or touch it if they don't worship it?
Okay, the key point, and it has to be stated clearly, is that Muslims do not worship the black stone. The touching or kissing of it is purely an act of following the Sunnah, the Prophet's tradition.
It's about obedience, not reverence for the object.
Exactly. The spiritual logic is about submission to the Prophet's example. The second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, said it best, "I know that you are a stone that can neither harm nor benefit. If I had not seen the messenger of Allah kiss you, I would not kiss you."
That's profound. It strips the ritual of any potential idolatrous meaning.
It makes the act purely one of obedience. It's a symbolic covenant point, not a deity.
Okay, next. The stoning of the pillars, the Jamarat. Visually, it looks like people are just throwing rocks at a wall. What's the purpose?
It's not a literal attack on a physical object. It's a symbolic rejection of temptation. It reenacts the moment Abraham was tempted by Satan to disobey God's command about his son.
So it's an externalization of an internal struggle.
That's it. Every pilgrim is symbolically declaring war on their own internal evil, their own ego and temptation. The physical act reinforces the need for self-discipline.
That connects it to a real-world moral application. What about the Sa'i, the running between the hills of Safa and Marwa?
This is a powerful commemoration of Hagar's desperate search for water for Ishmael. She ran back and forth 7 times until the Zamzam well miraculously appeared.
So the spiritual lesson is?
It's centered on tawakkul, which means trust in God, but a trust that is coupled with sincere, proactive effort. The teaching is clear. Divine provision, the miracle, follows human perseverance. It teaches active faith, not passive waiting.
And finally, the sacrifice, qurbani, which often draws criticism. How is that act performed?
Well, pre-Islamic sacrifice was often barbaric, smearing blood on the walls of the Kaaba, that kind of thing. The Islamic reform kept the core symbolism, Abraham's ultimate submission, but mandated an ethical transformation.
Meaning the meat has to be distributed?
It's strictly required to be distributed to the poor. This transforms the entire act into concrete charity and social responsibility. It shifts the focus from appeasing a deity to feeding a hungry human being.
That shift from blood on a stone to feeding the needy, that seems to perfectly encapsulate the entire ethical purification of the Hajj.
I think so. And that transformation rapidly gave the Hajj universal appeal. Although the Kaaba was a pan-Arab site, the purified Hajj immediately became global. Historical evidence shows that within decades, Muslims from Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Persia, they were all performing the pilgrimage.
And we see that global reach cemented through centuries, with figures like Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire, making his famous pilgrimage in 1324.
Right. He brought so much gold he disrupted the entire Egyptian economy. That event, and countless others, confirms its success. The pilgrimage was transformed from a polytheistic tribal ritual into the unifying centerpiece of a global monotheistic community.
So we've really mapped this incredible journey from a contested Abrahamic foundation through its pagan corruption to its revolutionary monotheistic restoration. It's a process of keeping the structure familiar, but completely redefining the why, the intention behind every single step.
And this radical enforcement of ritual equality is the final, powerful takeaway. The Hajj reforms did more than ban idols. They systematically dismantled the system of entrenched elite privilege, the hums by forcing mandatory, visible equality before God.
Which leaves a question for our listener.
I think so. It raises an important question for you as you look at your own world. What familiar, seemingly sacred institutions in our modern life, be they political, economic, or cultural, might be unknowingly using familiar frameworks to uphold hidden forms of elite privilege? Where is the modern version of the Quraysh deciding they don't need to stand with everybody else on Arafat?
A profound thought. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Go explore.